Have a written quiz, so make sure to look over your notes, and probably on some of these aspects. We're going to talk about stigma today. It's going to be on the chapters. As you could tell, what was going on in some of the chapters, I believe it was 3 and 4. That we're supposed to read for today? 3, 4, and 5. I got the syllabus. Regardless, 3, 4, and 5, or 3 and 4, whatever you want to focus on. What's going on here? What's the author doing with Edgar Casey's life here? Because there's not a lot of heavy information here. What's he trying to do? In all biographies, you have to sort of do this. That's why the beginning of movies are sometimes boring.
Just draws everything out.
Right, you got to explain. Look, where did he come from? How did he meet his wife? Where did he live? How did this fall out? In these chapters that you read, is Edgar Casey's life focused on psychic ability and mysticism? Which world does he live in the most of the time? It seems like, even though he wants to be a preacher. And here's the thing. Religion used to dominate European society, and in many societies it still dominates. There are places in this country where if you go and talk about evolution, you're the goofball. So, seriously, you are the moron. My mom, to the day she died, I could not convince her that evolution was real, although I did convince her that reincarnation might be real, which I was quite proud of. But I think it's because she was so close to the end. I think she wanted to believe that she could come back, partly. But for a Christian, for a devout Christian like my mother, to believe in reincarnation is something else. Okay, that's like saying Buddha was cool too, or something. That doesn't fly real well in the church. But even though he wanted to be a minister, and one of the things that churches tried to do after, particularly the Black Plague in the Middle Ages, was, like, for example, if you were the Catholic Church in the 1700s and the Black Plague came back around, is it going to profit you to say that the Black Plague was caused by sin?
Yeah.
Maybe, but what's the problem with that? I got rid of the sinners and I stopped sinning. Did the Black Plague go away? You might say something like this. Here's where you can combine science. So, what was the cause of the Black Plague? It was the fleas and the rats, and it was the bacteria they had inside of them, right? So, if you're the church, and you know, I'll tell you right now, this shows you how, when the mystical world dominated, do you know how dumb you would sound if you said to somebody in the 12th century, oh, disease is caused by little microscopic creatures that you can't see? Do you know how dumb that would have sounded? They would have taken you off to the sanitarium in a minute. They'd be like, man, this guy's really got some stupid ideas. He says there's something called bacteria that makes people sick. And you can kill it with mold and fungus, which is what penicillin is, believe it or not. It's like a form of mold or something like that. And I still love the fact that, never eat in a laboratory, but that penicillin was discovered because some dumbass left a sandwich sitting out. Seriously. That's how it was discovered. You know? Anyway, so the church wanted to, if you're the church and it's the 1700s, and you don't want to repeat what happened in the 1200s, when you lost a lot of credibility, in the 1400s, when you lost a lot of credibility because you were unable to determine what caused the plague, you do not want to make that mistake again, do you? Because, by the way, you know what happened right after the Black Plague? The Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther nailed his little theses up to the thing and said, you guys are dumb. Okay? And science started to move forward, the Renaissance, and then again the Enlightenment, where people said, look, we can observe things and stop them from happening. Rain doesn't occur because you pray. Rain occurs because it's a mix of these forces in the air. So focus more on the physical world that is sort of not devoid of God, but operates in and of itself. And one of the things, so if you're the church in the 1700s, you want to come into the rational scientific world, not all the way. You want to stick your foot in the bathtub there, you can stick your toe in, and go, okay, look, you know why the rats and fleas were sent here? Because God's angry at you. See how they can mix those two things together? They're still admitting that the plague is caused by a bacteria, right, or the fleas and rats, but they're saying, well, the reason why is because you're unclean. And I'm sure most of you have heard the statement, and I almost think it comes out of more of the scientific tradition. Cleanliness is next to godliness. You've ever heard this? That is sort of the church kind of giving in and saying, you know what, it's probably good if people wash their hands. I know it's hard for us to believe this, but in the Middle Ages, People couldn't understand that if you were out in the field playing around with cow crap and you came in and you gave birth to your, helped your wife give birth, all of a sudden she would die from some kind of infection. People didn't understand that. People didn't understand that if you use the bathroom that you need to rinse your hands off before you ate. People didn't understand this kind of stuff. So really I think this cleanliness next to godliness thing is just as much about the reality of, hey, we don't want, if you're the church, you don't want your people dying off. So you want to keep them alive as long as possible. And the way you do it is you say, well, you know what? Yes, bacteria causes diseases, but because you were unfaithful to the Lord, you're getting punished for this and that. So it's sort of straddling it. And with Edgar Casey, you can see that, does he have any problems believing in angels? Not really. But here's the thing. Did he have a problem talking to other people and telling them that he saw angels? That one preacher, Mr. Moody, he had no problem saying that to. But in general, did he go around yakking about the fact that he sees dead people like it's a sixth sense? Because he knew instinctively. Now, here's another thing about stigma, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. When you're lower class, like Edgar Casey is essentially, right? He's basically lower class. He didn't own any land. He worked at a bookstore. His father was somewhat important. He was a squire and sort of like, an important figure. But this was by no means wealthy. And what we mean by wealthy is different than statement. So here's the thing. If you're someone like Kim Kardashian, who virtually has no credibility anyway, or better, if you're Dale Earnhardt, you can say out loud in public that I think my dad's ghost pulled me out of the car, right? Did that harm Junior's career? No, he's actually more popular now, and not because he admitted his dad pulled him out of the car. And some people that loved his father were like, yeah, see, good son there, right there, heralding his father. And I'll tell you right now, when Dale Earnhardt Sr. died, it stopped traffic for 100 miles in North Carolina. People were lined up like it was Abraham Lincoln. I'm serious. It was insane. And so people love his dad, and they want him, and I think a lot of NASCAR fans wanted, they want his ghost to come back and drive the car. I'm serious. I don't know how you're going to push the pedals. Guess you're going to get some lessons from Patrick Swayze. Remember when you moved the coin? Anyway, so Edgar Casey sort of existed in both these worlds, but clearly the dominant reality back then was this: that you don't say weird stuff. You don't say that your unicorns are real. You don't say that psychic abilities are real. There were actually laws against fortune-telling. He was arrested in New York for fortune-telling. He was arrested in Dayton for practicing medicine without a law or without a license. So they were serious. So other than being arrested and other stuff, there were serious ramifications if you were at Edgar Casey's class level and you started talking like a kook. Because now, you know what you sound like? You sound like the homeless guy down in Penn Station talking about how like the government injected him with some kind of serum and now he talks backwards. Or something like that, seriously. When they squirt it. And by the way, this should tell you something about your government. They used to go into bars and squirt acid, I think I told you this, and squirt acid into people's drinks and not tell them. Isn't that messed up? Can you imagine if you did that, the government would probably give you 20 years for like poisoning, for attempted murder or something like that. So
Agent Orange.
Yeah, that's way worse because LSD is big high. Agent Orange kills you, gives you Parkinson's, all kinds of stuff.
Well, what's his name? The Rents Too Damn High Party. That guy. He was exposed to Agent Orange, and the reason why he wears gloves is because he thinks that if he takes off his gloves, he dies. Yeah, and Agent Orange it messes with your mind psychologically. And I've heard it was something like 1,000 times more of a carcinogen than like DDT or something ridiculous. And it was used, if you guys don't know, to melt plants like big tropical leaves. You know how thick a palm leaf is? This stuff, when they poured on trees, would melt the trees, melt it like it was like sugar cubes, and you poured tea over it.
My buddy's dad used to drop acid, and he like did a lot. He says that he still sometimes will see stuff.
For a while, if you had taken more than 10 hits of acid, you were considered to be clinically insane. And the problem was, you had an entire generation who had taken 10. Some of them had taken 10 hits at one time. So anyway, so if you look at what Edgar Casey was doing, he's trying. What kind of a life did he want? What did he want to do as his profession? I just mentioned it. Yes?
You want to be a minister?
Right. So he still wanted to be spiritual, but he didn't, I'll tell you right now, had he become a minister and he was still doing the readings, do you think he would have said stuff like, oh yeah, Atlantis exists? Oh, and your kids are sick? Let me get into a hypnotic trance and go read the Book of Life and tell your child how to get well. You know how silly, even back in the 1890s, that would sound? And remember in the beginning of chapter 1, so I think a New York Times reporter and a doctor came to see, right? Because when you hear stories like this, how do you think people reacted to hearing a story that some guy could get into a sleep-like trance and read people's past lives in hell? How do you think people viewed that? Especially in the Northeast, in the big cities like Boston. Do you think they were willing to believe that? And so, one of the things they constantly did to Edgar, once he started to decide to do readings on a more regular basis, one guy they had, he was a blind doctor who was an expert in anatomy. And they had Edgar Casey go into a room next to this doctor and do a reading on a patient that this doctor had had. And he gave the exact diagnosis that the doctor gave. And they were convinced that he was just faking it and he read medical books. One of the other things they did, they got a bunch of doctors together. This reminds me of like the Milgram or something weird. Or something almost like the Nazis would have thought about to do. Because they injected gasoline into people and took out parts of people's brains and all kinds of stuff. One of the things they did, they got him into the hypnotic trance, and they wanted to make sure, is he really in a hypnotic trance or is this pretending? And so they jabbed a needle through his cheek, all the way through his cheek. And you see this, you can go to Coney Island and watch this if you want. And then they pulled up, this is going to be a little bit sick, so you might want to cover your ears. They pulled up his fingernail. And he didn't flinch while he was in this hypnotic state. And then when he woke up, he was in absolute pain. And after that, he said he was done with doctors. He said, and for like 5 or 6 years after, he gave no readings whatsoever. And you remember when the angels came to him, it was because he asked them, he wanted to help people. And they said, there you go. And it reminds me, be careful what you ask for, right? Because the spirits care that he would be ostracized or thought to be weird. And think of John Edwards. Did he want to be a psychic? How did he react when that woman said that you're going to be a psychic? He's like, you remember he goes, if you would have had a camera, and he probably did one of these like, yeah, that'll be it. And you remember he was making fun of his mom and all that other stuff, and part of that came, I think his family is a perfect example of this. Mom was over here, I mean, she probably believed in like fairies and leprechauns, and when you start going like Disney level kind of, that's when people go, whoa, there's no Harry Potter. Don't tell Aleister Crowley that or his father. But anyway, and then his father was in this side. Didn't believe none of this. Okay? And so let's break these down a little bit. So we'll get to the book here a little bit because there were certain instances where Casey talked about stigma. But literally, if you are lower class and you have a stigma attached to you, you might as well be invisible. In India, they have a caste called the Untouchables, and when you're an untouchable, nobody talks to you. People get out of your way. Pretend like you don't exist. It is really a strange effect. And if you go around saying something that's inappropriate in a society, you are going to be ostracized. To show you this, Kirk Cameron, if you don't know who this is, he was on the show called Growing. Was it Growing Pains? Yeah. And he's a conservative. And a conservative Christian. He came out the other day, and you know Hollywood, where they feel about homosexuals. There's a lot of acceptance of gay people in Hollywood, because there's a lot of gay people in Hollywood. And they're very liberal and at the forefront. You don't make a movie like Brokeback Mountain if you're against homosexuality. And so he came out and said that homosexuality was wrong and gay marriage was a sin. And he got destroyed.
That was the dad, right?
No, Kirk Cameron. He was the kid.
Oh, it was the kid. Yeah, the old.
The curly,
right?
the curly-haired kid.
Yeah.
His sister is an actress as well.
Yeah, she was on Full House.
Yeah, Candace Cameron. She actually still acts. So, I saw her on one show recently. That was about it. But let me tell you something right now. Do you think Kirk Cameron's going to get any more jobs? Just like Mel Gibson. I don't think Steven Spielberg is hiring him. Mel Gibson went on this drunken anti-Semitic rant in the back of a cop car. He was calling cops like he was sitting there going, you damn blanking, you know, calling them Jews, and it was like, I think one of them was an Asian American cop, so it's like, most Asian Americans aren't Jewish, so and then he explained later, he said, oh, it's because I was drunk. And I was like, you know what, buddy, I've seen a lot of drunk people, they don't do that. Just like Michael Richards, you didn't have a nervous breakdown. You're just a jerk. You know? Call it what it is, you are racist, Michael. So, anyway. So, when you get a stigma attached to you, it can have a serious ramifications for your future life. If you want to get married, I suggest not getting a stigma attached to you. If you want to have a good job, if you want to run for office, if you want your family to still be around you, if you want the general public to view you in a good light, if you want the police to leave you alone, when you get a stigma attached to you, and now most stigmas are like stigmas that are attached by going to jail or being convicted of a crime. Like, for example, the state, when you're convicted of a sex crime, they make you sign up to a database. When I was in Phoenix, Mike Tyson moved there, and he had to, because he's been convicted of rape, he had to sign up at the sex predator office. And they send, and this is, and I love this, they don't, you can access this database. But that ain't enough. You know what else they do?
You hear the addresses.
Yeah, they send a flyer out. And I think that some communities, they send people to people's door. They send door to door and go, hey, hey, hey. Not to scare the hell out of you and your kids, but hey, there's a sicko level 3 predator down the street. Don't worry about it, but there's a sicko down the street. Don't go buy a security system, but there's a pervert child rapist down the street. But we got it under control. And it's like, if you're a neighbor, you can't view that in a positive light. I think a for sale sign goes out. And one of the issue is, because of this issue, when you're a sex predator, let's say you've been in jail for 20 years, and let's say that you think that you're cured, although it's very difficult to cure somebody of sex predator, I'll tell you that right now, unless you castrate it seriously. And some of them beg not to be let out of jail. Charles Manson, before he murdered all those people, he said, don't let me out. Guess what they did? Let me out. So if you're a sex predator or even a convict, it is very difficult to find a place to live. And what happens is you get neighborhoods that get collections of sex predators. So if it's like a low-income area,
Sex predator ghetto.
yeah, like the Section 8 housing. Yeah. So yeah, and I would say to people who live in these inner-city neighborhoods, what did you do to deserve a bunch of perverts, child molesters living in your neighborhood? And that shows you the stigma of being poor anyway. That's why they build trash compacting things in factories next to poor houses or airports. No, they don't build wealthy houses next to JFK, okay, even though they're expensive. Like my friend lives over in Springfield, if you know what I'm talking about, Brookfield Avenue, Springfield Avenue, and it's right by JFK, and we go over to his friend's house, and there's apartments, and the planes, I could read the serial numbers on. I mean, it looks like they're scraping the top of the house, and it is an unbelievable sound. Like, you think I thought it was an earthquake. I was like, what the hell is that? And airplanes are at like 140 decibels, so it could damage your ears and stuff like that. And they don't do that there's no airplanes flying over Old Brookville. Not that close, at least. They do fly, if you've seen them, they fly around here.
I was just at Maho Beach in the Caribbean. That's the beach where the planes come right over the beach, and they are literally like 20 feet above your head.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's
and with terrorists around, do you really want to be flying that close to a public access beach where somebody can get a shoulder-fired missile and just sit there and blow it out of the sky? I mean, that's essentially what could happen.
It's really like
or laser pointers. People do that stupid stuff.
It's like 20 feet of sand, then the road, then 10 feet, then the fence for the airport.
And you could easily cut that fence, and where is this? The Bahamas or Jamaica?
It's in St. Martin, I think.
One of the Virgin Island things?
Yeah, it's one of the Virgin Islands, and it's
that probably makes sense.
Beach.
There's not a lot of terrorists in St. Martinique and stuff like that. I mean, name a terrorist attack that happened in the Bahamas. People are just, I bet if a terrorist went down there, they'd just be like, man, this is too good of a place. I can't go to this place. The weather's too nice. They'd probably just stay there and be like, things have changed. I quit your group. Okay, I'm staying on the beach here. Anyway. Alright, so we'll go back to the stigma here in a second. But, interestingly enough, to some extent, this is a very public reality. This is dominant in public. And so what that means is, though, even though people profess this out in public, like, I'll tell you right now, do you think most police officers want to admit that they use psychics? Do they?
No, you can't.
Oh, really? Let's see.
I told them I smoked pot and got disqualified.
No, but they use psychics to solve crimes.
Oh, I thought you meant like if a cop said that he went to see a psychic.
But what's the difference between using a psychic to solve a crime and believing in them? Here's the thing, though. Even though the police in general will not come out and say that they believe in psychics, because you lose credibility, especially if you want to be the sheriff or you want to run for office. Like, if you want to, I'll tell you right now, if you want to run for office, the quickest way to kill your candidacy, other than saying that you like lust after children, which is pretty horrible, it's a crime. Some non-criminal thing you can do is say, yeah, I believe in psychics and aliens and the Loch Ness Monster and Godzilla. You start saying stuff like that, you know, I mean, you might as well just tar and feather yourself. I mean, that's what you're doing to some extent. But if you look at this, so even though out in public, where'd that go? Oh, here it is. So here is an article that talks about the use of psychics by police, and it says, Nickel published several articles in Psychic Sleuths to the effect that while most police officers or departments take psychic information under consideration, they do not actively seek out such help, at least not under official channels. So they won't say that they use this to find a kidnapped victim. I can almost bet you, you know the serial killer in Gilgo Beach? I can almost bet you some psychics on the job.
Do you think have they ever solved a crime with a psychic?
They have found like kidnapped bodies and stuff. Very rarely do they ever find somebody like alive. The psychic usually tells them that they're already dead. What they do is they get an object that the person has. Remember those psychometry things that they were talking about last time? They hold like an object in their hands, and they'll use remote viewing to say, and you know it's a body when they go, it's in a heavily wooded area, right? That's usually where they look at these things. So, and believe it or not, smaller police forces are actually more likely. I think NYPD force and stuff, big city forces get caught up in the CSI stuff, right? That science can solve this problem, and it's like you get a psychic in here and it'll probably figure it out in 10 minutes. But police don't like, first of all, if that gets out, you look really bad. What if they're wrong, and you raid a house that they say somebody's kidnapped in, and you kick the door in, and you accidentally shoot somebody? Like, now you look really dumb. Right? Now you look really dumb. And you don't want to be, and do police officers, where do the police departments get their money from? Taxes. Do you want your tax dollars going to pay some goofy psychic?
No.
If you don't believe in them? There's another reason why they don't say anything about it. Right? And psychics charge a lot of money. You know, it's $50 for an hour of reading. I'm going to try and get one to come in.
She didn't know that.
50 for an hour. I don't know where you're going.
50?
50. I've been to psychics and they're a lot more than that.
Yeah, well, some of them on the phone and stuff. But still, I'm going to try to, if you know some, ask them if they'll come and speak in class.
My mom couldn't remember.
I don't know how much I can pay them, but the one thing I would say, they might be able to get a lot of customers if they come in here and talk to people. That's the only thing I can say. So if you can get, even somebody who's a palmist or a tarot card reader or something like that. Okay? Because I want them to come in and talk about how they get treated by the general public.
Okay.
And things like that. So,
like Miss Cleo, man.
Yeah. I can tell her. I'll tell you her psychic reading. You're going to be a lot poorer after this phone call. There's a psychic reading for you.
Yeah.
You're going to be really unhappy and have a lot less money when you get off the phone with me. I always imagine that she goes, hey, your husband's cheating on you, and the woman gets off the phone and like goes and beats the hell out of you. like, what are you talking about? Yes.
But does the psychic stuff hold up in court though? Like if they put a psychic.
I don't know about that, but here's the thing: they usually use psychics to find bodies and clues. They usually don't. They don't go to a psychic and go, was OJ guilty?
They would be able to know if they were really a psychic.
Well, hey, if you're a good enough psychic, shouldn't you be able to, like Edgar Casey did, go into the Akasha records and go to the day that Nicole Brown was murdered, Nicole Brown Simpson was murdered, and see who did it?
Yeah.
But here's the problem. I don't think a jury is going to listen to that kind of crap. Not out in public. Maybe out privately they might do that. And if I'm a lawyer, I'm not letting that crap go on in court. Are you out of your mind? If I'm a defense attorney, that's why people pay for Kardashian. That's why Kim's got a lot of money.
I saw a video online of someone, I forgot her name, but she was claiming to be like one of the world's most famous psychics.
Probably that Long Island medium
and
lady.
some woman came up onto like the stage, it was on like Maury or something, I forgot what it was, but the woman starts talking about how she lost her son or everything, and before she could finish her sentence, the psychic goes, I see him in water. Like he's in water somewhere.
So he drowned.
And she goes, he must have drowned. And she's like, no, he died on September 11th. And she goes, well, maybe it was the hose water, like that he drowned in the hose water.
I mean, the sprinklers were on.
Yeah, like
well, you gotta understand, a big building like that, they got standpipes that are filled with water, and when the plane went through, it was busted everything out. But one of the reasons why that building fell, I know this is a sidebar, one of the reasons why that building fell was there were no internal support barriers. The exoskeleton of the building is what supported it. So it increased office space. So when the plane went through, and it cut the elevator cords, and the stairways were in the corner. So when that one plane hit like corner-wise like that, it knocked a lot of the escape routes out. And I can't imagine what it was like to be on the 107th floor and know that there was nothing. You could look down and see safety, and there's nothing you could do to get there. I mean, you want to talk about wanting to invest in a rope ladder or a parachute. I assure you that a lot of people now who live in high-rise buildings have, or work in high-rise buildings have parachutes. They sell urban parachutes. And actually,
you could jump from that low of
that building was 1,100. People jump off of buildings. Those base jumpers jump off of bridges. Bridges ain't 1,000 feet high.
Big shoots.
Your only concern would be slamming back into the building. That's what the fire might draw you.
Break my legs and part alive.
Well, you remember that one guy tried to climb down the building and he slipped. Remember he was on the outside? It was terrible, terrible, terrible.
Do you think that when you jump, like when they were jumping, I know this is pretty bad, like, you got it, there's no way, you have to die before you hit the ground.
That's what people said. I don't know if that's true or not.
If you, like, when I was taking Dr. Kushner's terrorism class, like, he was showing us, like, that stuff, and these people would jump, and then halfway down, you just see their body, like, just flop.
Like, paralyzed with fear. I don't know. I guarantee you, I don't want to get into the details of it, I guarantee you a lot of people died when they hit the ground. But I can tell you right now that the pain was probably a microsecond, because when that kind of blunt force trauma knocks the life right out of you, I mean, seriously, I mean, you can hit somebody with a baseball bat and they're dead. So I assure you, your body's accelerating probably, their bodies were probably moving at 90 to 100 miles an hour, if not more, and just do the math. Think about a car accident with no seatbelt on at 90 miles an hour and you hit a brick wall. Think about what happens there. So nasty. I would be interested to see if John Edwards has done, I would assume he's done reading for 9/11 people. I would be interested to hear not only what the spirits say to him, but also how they died, like what happened in the building when they were in there. He needs to channel somebody who's on that plane. Anyway. So let me go over this here. So it says, under anonymity, several people have indicated to this author, Ramsland, that psychics have been brought into cases despite prohibitions against it. All right, so there are official prohibitions against psychics and police forces. Vernon Geberth, author of Practical Homicide Investigation, devotes 5 pages to how police officers can and do work with psychics, but Barry Fisher and Techniques of Crime Investigation, equally as renowned to law enforcement, ignores the entire issue. So here we have a debate with the mystical world and the rational world. This guy's saying this is the dumbest crap that was invented since pet rocks. Geber admits that it's controversial to work with psychics and that police officers are naturally skeptic of their claims, but he presents the results of his research on several psychics, including Noreen Rainier, and whom Gary Posner approaches with a skeptical eye, and Nichols' psychic sleuth. He claims that if the technique has proven successful at all, it should be considered again, calling a psychic a person who is extra sensitive to non-physical forces of life energy without explaining. And some people in the metaphysical and the mystical world would say this is the wrong way to look at this. It's just a different physical reality. That a spirit, like with back to the Ghostbusters thing, spirits are energy. We have in the universe what's called the law of the conservation of energy. And spirits are energy. They're just different types of energy. And the reason why most mystical people say that is that if you actually, here's where this comes from science. Those of you who know who Nikola Tesla is, he's the one who invented AC current. if you ever seen these Tesla coils, these balls where you can touch them, the electricity touches your hand. He figured out that if you change the frequency of electricity, that you could send 100,000 volts through your body, or like 10,000 volts, and it won't even hurt you at all. There's no heat to it, there's nothing. And if that's the case, then what a spiritual energy is similarly to that. That it's just a change in frequency. Right? And they also say that when you die, I think, what, like 8 or 9 grams? Your body weighs 8 or 9 grams less? So, yeah, 21 grams. So we don't know what's really going on, if it's non-physical or metaphysical, whatever it is. But certainly, maybe what we can term the invisible world or the spiritual world or whatever it is. So, anyway. Without explaining what that is, Gebhardt accepts Rainier's rendition that this means getting rid of logic and rationale without any basis in science. Gebhardt says that psychics have learned to control a portion of the brain which is not generally used. So he's saying, hey, look, there's a science to this that we can probably examine. And here's the thing. This is very much a polemic debate because science on some levels, except for the Gansfield experiments and the Otto Gansfield experiments, and there was I'll send you the link if you want to. There was a meta-analysis done by Jessica Utz. And she looked at whether or not psychic ability was actually scientifically provable. And the one thing here is that one of the things they probably need to do is not look at the general population and say, does everybody have psychic ability? They need to take people like John Edwards and this Long Island psychic and this, the other woman you're talking about, hook them up to them things in their head and let them do this psychic thing and see if their brains operate differently. Wouldn't that be one way?
No one's ever done that before.
Huh?
No one's ever done that before?
I've never seen a study. If they've done it, nobody wants it out. It's sort of, I bet the government's done that. There's no doubt in my mind that the CIA and the Department of Defense have probably done stuff like that. Because when you're in the middle of a Cold War, you don't give a damn about science and rationality. You just want the answer. Right? So, or if you're trying to find bin Laden. And I would not be shocked if they used the psychic and remote viewing to make sure that bin Laden was in that compound. I mean, do you think Obama would want people to know that? I just showed you the thing with Nancy and Ronald Reagan. They were making major decisions about when to plan treaties with the Soviet Union based on an astrologer. That's bizarre.
They were planning on using a psychic the whole time with bin Laden. Why didn't we catch him earlier?
Because it's good to have the boogeyman out there. You know? You can't justify increasing war demands when the people you're fighting are all dead. Right? And I think also they didn't want to kill him to some extent, or capture him and keep him because it would elevate his status. Right? That if they kept him in Guantanamo,
should have hung him from the friggin' Empire State.
Well, what they didn't want to do was they didn't want to defile his body because they had enough problems with these soldiers pissing on Taliban. You've seen these pictures of the soldiers that were pissing on dead Taliban soldiers, which I would assume the Taliban was probably doing something similar. And you know probably better than others. Well, look, whether it's the Revolutionary War or the Civil War or the Afghan war turns into hell, total hell. I don't even think hell is that bad.
Probably not.
There's like the Civil War, people in World War I, the trenches, there were feces everywhere and maggots and lice and god awful. And like during the Revolutionary War, people were more likely to die of yellow fever than they were a bullet. You know, I mean, it was absurdity. Or during the Russian campaign with the Germans, they didn't even have shoes, and it was 20 below zero. You know, I mean, it's nasty. So if people are in a war, they'd rather, if they have some, it's like a secret weapon, right? Like nuclear weapons or something. I've got this psychic, you don't. Anyway, it's like, who's got Einstein? Right? Who's got Oppenheimer? Right? The only reason why we have nuclear technology and rocket technology is we went and stole these Nazi scientists away. And if Einstein hadn't been Jewish and left Germany during the Nazi rise, God knows what would have happened in 1943 or 1944. Anyway, so it goes on here. Then he proceeds to offer guidelines to agencies that are considering calling on a psychic. So he's saying, look, if you're going to do this, you better follow these rules. The psychic's performance will be tested by results. There's the science element, right? The experiment, observation. Not just, I think it's there. You know, the psychic will have a distinct method of operation, meaning to have a procedure. And if you know anything about the military or police or organizations, are they into procedure? Phil, I want to get some night vision goggles. Here, fill out this 300-page request form. And then take it down to that office and get it notarized. And then take it to the other office and get it stamped. And then go down here and make sure the colonel signs off and initials on it. It's like, my gosh. They actually call it a cluster blank. Fill in the blank.
It took me 3 weeks to get a trauma plate for a bulletproof
Yeah, I mean, look, they're going into Iraq and they don't have armor plating on the Humvees. I mean, the stupidity of that is just unbelievable. And they didn't have armor on Humvees for like 3 years. Anyway, the psychic should be considered as an aid in developing clues, not just to solve the whole thing. You guys, come on. The police should provide all follow-up to information offered. Since there are no scientific guidelines, the police must determine whether the psychic's claims are legitimate or worth pursuing. That's sort of, how do you know that? You know? Officers who cannot accept the psychic's work should not get involved, as their attitudes can block the psychic's effectiveness. They're like a lead wall, like Superman, and you're like made out of lead. You can't see through you. So you're disrupting their... There's just a lot of negativity in this room. It reminds me, have you ever seen the Seinfeld episode where George goes to the holistic healer? He's like, and he goes to Jerry, he just looked at him and goes, "You were eating too much dairy." He's like, "What, really?" Anyway, the psychic should offer information not available to the public in publicized reports as a way to prove his or her special insight. You'd think they wouldn't want to tell anybody in the public. All conversations with the psychic should be taped. So they want to be like, "This is what you said. Don't go out in the public and say something different." While Noreen Rainier apparently prefers to hold an object, so she's one of those psychometry things, that had belonged to a victim at the time of the murder, and Gebert does not raise any objections. In fact, such handling could contaminate evidence and make chain of custody claims difficult later in court because they're touching it with their fingers.
So she holds somebody's object in her hand, gets a feel for the cosmic scent.
The vibration, it sort of connects them to it. It's sort of like the way a dog picks up on a trail of pheromones or a smell or something. Yeah, that each object has a you heard John Edwards. Each object has a specific vibration to it, and a vibration that is placed there by your hand. So, and here, if you really want to stretch it and connect it to science, you could say, you know what happens is your hand is made up of atoms. And atoms have electrons whizzing around them, and so do objects. So right now, I used to joke with my psychic friend, I was like, look at me exchanging electrons. Like right now, I am rubbing this table, and electrons from my hand are going onto this table. And so with my oils in my hands, and all kinds of other stuff, right, that a psychic could potentially use. Okay? Like I'm merging with the wall right now. Okay? It's like the wall probably doesn't like it. It's probably going to file charges on me. Less than the wall. Man, if walls can talk. Anyway. Nobody would want to hear what they say. Alright, so let's go down this. So rational scientific is the dominant frame, especially out in public. It is the dominant frame when it comes to institutions like the educational world. The educational world, can you get a degree on psychic development? No. But you can get a degree in parapsychology. But it's still highly subjective. That's what Bill Murray's character was on Ghostbusters. And you remember at the very beginning of the movie, the guy, their head of their department comes and basically fires them and pulls their grant money and says, your conclusions are highly suspected, your methods are a joke, and all this other stuff. And so they come up with this idea of catching a ghost. Anyway. And then they package it on lunchboxes and stuff. So anyway, so schools, the government does not, even though it does use psychics behind the scene. So the formal position for most institutions is that psychics are not real. Even the media. Does the media project, even though it discusses fantasy and it makes a lot of money off of John Carter and Harry Potter, I guess not John Carter. Disney lost $200 million on that. And anyway, they should have invested in the Hunger Games more. See, that's why you need me, Disney. Anyway, I would have said, what? You spent $250 million on a movie about a Confederate soldier that went to Mars?
It's a good book, though.
But people have tried repeatedly to turn this into a movie. It's like Lord of the Rings. It took Peter Jackson to do that, and it took essentially 7 or 8 hours of filmmaking to make that movie. You know. So anyway, and Hunger Games had no problem translating from book to movie. But regardless, even though the media presents that fantasy, that indulge yourself in fantasy, does the media present fantasy like it's real? That like Godzilla could be real? To some extent, but let me put it this way. On the news, do people go, another Godzilla sighting today? But they go, but how about things like how about things that are sort of straddling? How about the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot? Are those things real? Or how about UFOs? Are those real? Does the media many times report on UFOs? Sometimes. So, the one thing the media does, they leave it ambiguous, don't they? I don't know, it could be real. One of the reasons why the media does that is, they used to think giant squid were fake. And some of the tentacles have washed up. There was this fish they thought was extinct called a coelacanth, and they caught one off of the coast of Africa. There's actually a legend in parts of Africa that guess what's still alive? Huh?
The Kraken?
No, sort of close. The brontosaurus. You ever heard the legend of Baby?
You know.
They made a movie about this. People thought that there was dinosaurs alive in the jungles of Africa. I've heard stories like this. In the Caribbean, supposedly there's 200-year-old parrots, and they tell stories about like pirates. Parrots crack me up. They're not just mimicking stuff, because they crack jokes. You can't crack jokes if you don't know what you're doing. Parrots are, if you teach them wrong, they make fun of people. They're like, "What's up, dumbass or ugly?" Or, seriously. Come on in, ugly. Anyway, I'm telling you, if you teach a bird that, and they're smart. They're pretty smart. They actually have, I've heard, the intelligence of a 7-year-old. They can recognize objects and colors. So you go tell them to get the blue block, and they'll go get it.
Well, that parrot Alex or Einstein, like they were having conversations with
Yeah, and asking stuff like, "How do you feel?"
Yeah.
Which is, most people don't give birds a sense of emotion. So, and most people just think, well, it's like a minor bird. It's just mocking. But anyway, and they live a long, long time. So, but again, are these things real or are they not? The media loves to tantalize people, right? Like, it could be real. And I'll tell you right now, when I was a kid, the Loch Ness Monster was like a bit of an obsession. I was convinced that there was some prehistoric animal in this place. And every time there was a little sighting or a picture, and I've watched all the documentaries, they actually sent a scientific team out to study this. And they put cameras underneath the water and all kinds of stuff like that. But people are willing to believe, hey, something else could be out there. Atlantis could be real. Maybe there are unicorns. What do I know? What is Bigfoot? Like all this stuff. Yes?
I was watching a show the other night. They thought that it was on, I guess, Nat Geo or something, or one of those channels. And they were in this village in some Spanish country somewhere, and they used to keep some of the boys inside the house when the moon was out because they thought they were werewolves.
There's also
going around with cameras, like trying to find them.
Right, and there's also the legend, if you're from the Caribbean or from Mexico, of the chupacabra, which is the goat sucker, and the goat. This is the story I've heard of the goat sucker. It was a wild animal that was on a spaceship from another galaxy or another solar system, and they left it here by accident, and now it sucks up like the blood of goats and right and stuff like. It's probably an alligator. It's probably some weird mix of animal or something like that. But again, if science is to approach those issues, it approaches them with skepticism and says, you know what? Look, I'm going to prove to you. Because in science, do you try and prove stuff, or what do you do?
Well, in science, you have a method. So, like, if you show.
What's your goal? To disprove something or to prove something? Technically. He's actually more right. What you do is you go about like, okay, if gravity is real, let's try to disprove it.
Process of elimination.
To some extent. Now you do also want to prove it. You want to divine. You want to do both. Yeah, but let's say you think there's a Loch Ness monster. You want to go there to disprove it. You want to go there with skepticism. Because what scientists don't want is to have their objectivity tainted by some emotional connection that, damn it, I know there's a Loch Ness monster in there somewhere, and therefore that leads you to ignore the evidence. Just like if you have a bad attitude towards psychics, you're going to ignore the evidence that exists there. I mean, you cannot deny what John Edwards is doing to some extent, right? He is doing uncanny, weird things. Saying stuff that only, like Kim Kardashian's reading, which I'm not sure why I liked it. She said that there were incidents that Edwards talked about that there was no way she could, between her and her dad, and he could have known that unless he had been there. And this Long Island psychic as well. And how about Edgar Cayce? So I think this is a good point to discuss this point. From what you read, is what Edgar Cayce, is what Thomas Sogru described Edgar Cayce? Is he really a psychic? Can he do these things? Is this real, or is this some kind of a fantasy, that mass delusion? What do you think at least provides some proof that something's going on here? What was his level of education? 8th grade. Did he have any medical knowledge, really? How about the sleeping on books? Isn't that a little weird?
Yeah.
Explain that, science. What is this, osmosis? Is it like sinking into your brain? I mean, shouldn't he have ink spots on his face or something? I mean, so what do you guys think? I think this is good to do this poll. Who here thinks Edgar Cayce is really a psychic and really did these things that are written in the book? How many people, go ahead. How many people here don't think that this is real? How many people aren't sure? We'll see when we get to the end of the book. I'll tell you the people who, let me tell you the people who believed in Edgar. Who do you think believed that Edgar could do this stuff?
People who didn't have any money. People who
Well, not completely, because he dealt with a lot of wealthy people.
People with nothing to lose.
That's part of it, but why did people come to Edgar for the most part? Not to learn about
there
Atlantis.
was nothing left to do. There was nothing.
But what were they? What was their issue that they wanted him to deal with?
Craziness.
No.
They were sick.
Yeah. So did people get well when they followed what Edgar Cayce said? Isn't that proof? That's science, isn't it? And here's the other thing. There's two things. One, medical science has never sat down with this book and went through this and said, okay, let's test atomic iodine. Let's test this stuff. Let's test how castor oil works. Let's test all this stuff. Okay? Nobody ever did that. Okay? And also the fact is that Edgar Cayce was using science, when he was in this hypnotic trance, he would describe terminology in scientific language. He would say, look, here's where it is in the throat, and use Latin language, anatomy language, and again, he'd never read a medical book in his life. I still find it fascinating that if I could sleep on books and read stuff, I would put books underneath my bed. And every night, I would wake up 1,000 times smarter. It would be dangerous. It'd be like Limitless or something.
That was a good book. I love it.
Or Lawnmower Man. You get so smart you wouldn't even exist in this world. I've heard if you use like a certain percentage of your brain, you don't even really need to. Like we only use like 17, 20%. Yeah, most people maybe lower, 8%. So anyway, so let's go down this here. So rational and scientific thought is based on acquired experience and observational experimental knowledge. I know that rats caused the plague because there were rats in my apartment and a flea bit me and whatever. Maybe I didn't know it was the flea, but it had something to do with the rats. Or just the idea of disease, right? Like, I assure you the first person who came up with this concept of disease and bacteria, how do you prove that bacteria exists if you can't see it with the naked eye?
You prove, use markers that, maybe are byproducts of bacteria.
Okay, so something like mucus or something like that, but I can still maybe that's evil spirits. How can I prove definitively that there's invisible creatures or seemingly very small creatures?
Beside the microscope.
That's it. Were there microscopes back there when they first started talking about bacteria? So for the longest time, people just sort of had to take it on faith that this is what was occurring. And that's what led to a lot of the battles over, is this real or not? But that we can do an experiment, and many times using animals or something. If I want to find out if fleas are the cause of this, I go get a dog or some other animal, and I put it in a room with these infected fleas, and eventually it's going to get sick and die. You may not like that reality, but that's the way scientists work. Scientists, look, how do you think they come up with cancer drugs? Do you think they infect people with cancer? They're not even allowed to treat people with experimental drugs, even if they sign a waiver. So what they do is they put tumors on mice and things like that. Or if they want to find out what gene is causing alcoholism, they'll isolate the gene. One of the things that they've done recently, they have injected stem cells into mice that have had their spinal cords severed, and they've injected it in and it works. And the reason why they use rats is that rats genetically and physiologically are very close to humans, and I know that's hard for people to understand that rats are so closely related to you. If you actually look at it, the first mammals were essentially small rodents. I know that we're the proud primates, and we have opposable thumbs, and we built the Eiffel Tower, but I want you to know that according to evolution, your furthest ancestor was a little furry thing that scurried and ate dirt and probably played around in dinosaur dew and other stuff like that. And that's our ancestor, is some little rodent. And lucky it was like hidden caves, because when the mass extinction occurred with the dinosaurs, it survived. Okay? Anyway, so next time you see a rat or a mouse, you have a different attitude towards it. Anyway, number 2, it's focused primarily on the physical world. What can I see? What can I touch? I'm interested in studying heat levels, or infrared, or the weight of something, or how two things interact. Like if you ever, like here's an example. You ever poured vinegar into baking soda? What's it do? It's like Mentos and Diet Coke. But why does it do that? Because it's a chemical reaction, and I can describe it. And I can even write the formula on the board. Here's this molecule and this molecule, right? And I can take something like water and I can turn it into hydrogen and oxygen. Okay? Which is what they're trying to do with hydrogen-fueled vehicles. Like hydrogen, it only releases water vapor if you put it in a car, but it's highly flammable. That's what was in Hindenburg, was hydrogen. And it's highly flammable, so to run a car in hydrogen would be like everybody was driving around in a bomb, which would be you've seen the wrecks that people get into. You know, when I see somebody with like the whole side of their car scraped, I'm like, I need to stay away from you. That wasn't. They call them accidents, but I'm not sure how accidental some of these things are. So anyway, but regardless, focused on the physical world, things I can measure: temperature, time, water level, weight, chemical composition, whatever the hell it is. Okay, bacterial existence, all these types of things. Okay. Logic and rational thought and explanation. Occam's razor, I think I spelled that wrong. This concept that, look, the simplest solution is probably the right one. The leprechauns don't steal your socks out of the dryer.
I don't know, I always use a sock.
Yeah, that's one of the unexplained mysteries of life, isn't it? Stand-up comedians have talked about this, like the sock is like on your shirt, and it's like, okay, we're making a break for it, that kind of stuff. So, that's sort of, they made a joke on the Family Guy. You know, you've read these books, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, and they go into the wardrobe, and he did that. He went inside the dryer to look for a sock, and he fell out into Narnia. But still, science needs to focus on that or something, because that's one of those issues. So, anyway, but it's most likely somebody, if you're at the laundromat, it's most likely somebody stealing it or you dropping it. Okay, something like that. Right? Your car didn't stop because it's possessed by a demon. Maybe you got vapor lock or whatever it is. Anyway. Number 4, cause and effect. That things in the physical world are caused by other things. Okay? That there's a 1-for-1 ratio. Like if I push this, it's going to move. It's Newton's laws of motion. An object stays in motion unless acted upon by an external force. I'm sure, who here has taken physics? You know these rules, right? The rules of motion, right? That they talk about planets and how they move around and how gravity affects bodies. We can model this in formulas. If I drop this, I can model its weight and its resistance and everything, and I can tell you exactly how long it's going to take to hit the ground. I can tell you how much force it's going to take to hit the ground. Or if I have an internal combustion engine, I can tell you how much force that's going to create, how much gasoline it's going to take. It's not a guessing game. It's not that, oh, did you see that ghost push that to the ground? Okay? And why this came to dominate is because it works for the most part, doesn't it? Because the people who listened to the towns that took the church's advice during the Middle Ages and kicked out all the sinners, sometimes the plague got worse. The towns that listened to Guy de Chaulier, who figured out what was causing the disease, got better. And I remember I told you, superstition played a role in making the Black Plague worse because people thought cats were evil. And go ask a farmer if cats are evil, okay? There's not a single dairy farmer alive that doesn't have 20 cats. Seriously. For some reason, rats love the dairy farm. I guess it's the milk and stuff. Anyway, but seriously, right? And what I find interesting is that for the longest time, people in the Middle Ages couldn't figure out why people who had cats died at a lower rate. They couldn't figure that out because they thought cats were witches and they were shapeshifters and warlocks and all that. Poor cat. And you know what's worse is they blamed cats for the plague and they massacred a lot of them. And they found out later. Okay? Like with penicillin. Look, I get sick, I take this shot, it's all gone. Proof. I don't need, praying and giving money to the church is not going to make syphilis go away. You know, I mean, I wish it would. You know, Benjamin Franklin wished it would. Okay, Al Capone probably wished it would. Right? It doesn't work that way. Maybe I'm in extensive pain. Somebody gives me morphine. Maybe I don't know how it works, but I know it works. And then lastly, and this is probably one of the most important parts in relation to this mystical, religious, spiritual world, and we also call this like the world of fantasy or superstition as well, you know, like walking under ladders and things. But it denies the existence of psychics and other spiritual things. Not only denies it, designs experiments to disprove it, and really doesn't do rigorous evaluation. And for the most part, do scientists spend a lot of time exploring these issues? Are there any scientists out there trying to see God through a telescope? For the longest, here shows you how science and mysticism mix together with like conspiracy theories. When they first put the Hubble telescope up, the pictures were delayed because they said the lens was messed up. And I'll tell you right now, you're going to spend $1 billion on a telescope. You better make sure the lens is working. I mean, my gosh. Especially before you put it up in space. I mean, what are you doing? But conspiracy theorists and religious people said that the Hubble telescope saw God. And that they took pictures of God. And probably Jesus too, for the Christians. And that the NASA was hiding the proof of God. Seriously, people said that kind of stuff. And the UFO buffs, guess what they said that the Hubble telescope found?
Xeno?
Yeah, or alien worlds or whatever. Jeff?
Well, like, what about, like, the God particle? I mean, like, the whole concept of getting something from nothing, or, you know, or science...
You mean like this matter coming out of nothing? I think what needs to happen is, there's an in-between reality between these things, and it's called metaphysics. And metaphysics is a science, and it's the science of things like radio waves in space, but it's also the study of things like that. Like, what is antimatter? Where does it come from? Like, there's a lot of... Those of you who are into astronomy or astrology, or I mean astronomy, you know there's a lot of weird things in the galaxy. There's black holes, there's wormholes, there's massive stars that suck other stars in, there's galaxies running into each other, but, you know, there's like comets and asteroids. I mean, a comet alone is, what a weird thing to exist, right? It's this big, it's a frozen ball of rock with a gigantic tail on it, and if it smacks into a planet, it destroys it. They said that our moon was created by a collision with a comet or an asteroid, and particles were thrown up in the air. And here's the other part with science. Does science know where the first life came from, or how the universe really started to some extent? They've got this theory, the Big Bang Theory, which is a TV show that I like. But anyway, but they don't know where the first matter came from, and many scientists have suggested, hey, here is a place where we could bring religion and spiritualism and science together and go, you know what? And you'll hear this from religious people. They'll say, you know what? Okay, look, I believe in evolution, but I also believe in God, and maybe evolution is just the way God created the world. That there's an in-between reality. And metaphysics is a way to study those types of things. They would be looking at, well, why does your body weigh 21 grams less? Or what happens to, why, you know, like, look, if you've ever seen a dead body, you clearly know that something is missing. Isn't there something missing? There's no temperature in their body, there's no color, their eyes aren't moving. So there's, even though science doesn't respect this or doesn't admit this, I would say that most people, like that Gallup poll, believe that there's a soul or a spirit, that there's some energy force that drives life, and that's what gets knocked out of you. That's why blunt force trauma causes death, because it sort of knocks the spirit right out. Like, if you ever had the wind knocked out of you, imagine that, and it knocks the spirit right out of you. So you know, you're harmed there. So anyway, but again, and religion plays heavily upon the idea of the spirit and the soul, because to religion, the physical world is almost like a prison world. It's a world where you're wrapped up, you die, things are limited, you're controlled, you can't see through the veil of your dreams or the other world. And what the spirit is, and the spiritual world is a world without pain. It's a world without hunger. It's a world without desire. It's a world without limitations. It's a world where you don't have a body the way you know it is. This is a very attractive concept to a lot of people because there's a lot of pain and suffering in the world. And religion offers a way to look through that, hey, something better is out there. And they also would say, whereas scientists would say the essence of human being is physical, right? It's having a body, it's having your mind that works. Religious people would say the essence of human existence is spiritual. That when you strip away all else, like a nuclear blast could destroy this body. Religious people say nothing can destroy the spirit, not even a black hole. And nothing escapes from well, supposedly nothing. There's one called Cygnus X1 where there's a line of particles coming out of the black hole. So anyway, so we do know those interject out. We still, by the way, at the center of our galaxy, there's a massive black hole that's sort of, it's like a bathtub drain, and it's like sucking everything. It will take a long, long time. This planet will be a crusty ball of nothing before it even gets close to that. And eventually our galaxy is going to run into another galaxy and like explode all over the place. So, well, if you believe in the spirit, maybe you'll be around to see it. Okay, I can tell you right now, though, and to show you in the mystical, religious, spiritual world views this world as temporal. That okay, fine. When you're alive, these rules apply. When you're dead, they don't. And the proof is about temporality is, and I love this fact. Everything on Earth, including the sun, and everything in the solar system is going to be destroyed eventually. Everything. The pyramids, the Eiffel Tower, the entire planet is going to be destroyed. There will not be one element that proves that human beings exist except for one thing. Television and radio waves. People will be watching Married with Children in some galaxy somewhere when we're long dead. Isn't that wild? So then they can watch reruns of Dallas. They can watch reality shows and go, man, these humans were messed up. Anyway, they'll probably come here looking for Kim Kardashian. So non-dominant here, mystical, religious, spiritual, except for the media, religion, and I put police there, which with a question mark. So this is based on faith and belief, not just observation. But it's based on observation to some extent too. But it is mostly faith and belief. What is faith? It's a funny word. When somebody says, I take that on faith, what's that mean? Yeah, like, do you have proof? Go ahead.
Yeah, you have no proof.
It's like intuition. I have a feeling. It's more about emotion. This is the world of emotion to some extent, or feeling is a better way to put it. That I just have faith that this guy's not going to rip me off. And it's not always, right? Like Bernie Madoff. People had faith in Bernie Madoff, didn't they? Because if they would have studied what he was doing, do you think they would have had faith in him anymore?
Yeah, just insinuate taking more of a risk.
Right, and faith also suggests faith is about believing something even though you've never seen it, right? Physically, and people will often tell you they'll come. Even Jesus said this in the Bible. He said, "Look, can you see the air? But it's there, and if it wasn't there, you'd be dead. Or the wind, I can feel it, but I can't see it. So if God is that way, or spiritual things are that way." And if you saw John Edwards and Casey claim that, like right now in this room, there are hundreds of spirits just hanging out, listening to my lecture, sitting right next to you. That's a good way to get your own seat on the subway. Someone asks you to sit there, you can sit there. If you want to sit on top of my mother's ghost. This is my spiritual friend. Sorry, that was a bad joke. Anyway. I do that if I had to, I'd do that on an airplane. Because I don't like airplane. Maybe I wouldn't use my mother's code. Maybe I'll say something like, if you don't mind sitting next to Elvis, sing your song, Elvis. He'd still shake his hips, even as a spirit. Anyway. That's what I want. I want John Edwards to be like, I don't want to talk. I'd be like, look, after you get done talking to my grandpa and my mom, call Elvis up. You know? Anyway. You know he died on the toilet reading the Bible. Anyway. I'm not kidding. They don't put that stuff in the papers. Or they do now. Like Heath Ledger, he called one of the Olsen twins before he died. Which is not the memory that I would want to have of my dad. Anyway. Probably like, can you get some more dope? You know both the kids are on dope. They look terrible. They look like they should be on Twilight. So does Macaulay Culkin. I mean, I would be. He almost looks like an albino. You know, he needs to go outside. It's good for your body to be out in the sun. You know.
Yeah, he looks like a Twilight.
Yeah, I mean, my God. And what's worse, Mila Kunis dated him for 8 years.
She's smoking. I don't know.
She needs her eyes checked or
That
something.
gives guys like me a chance right there.
That's temporary. I don't think it's temporary insanity when it lasts for 8 years. She just broke up with him, though. Anyway, maybe she'd like Home Alone. Number 2, focus on spiritual or the unseen world. Number 3, posits an alternative view of reality and life and death. That the scientific view of death is you're dead. They bury you in the ground and worms eat your brain. But seriously, what did they say? Like, I want to say on Family Guy, Peter was talking to a Sunday school group. If you've ever seen the show, it's really irreverent. And one of the kids asked him, what happens if you die? And he goes, you go to heaven with all your friends and your dog. And he goes, I'm just yanking your chain. You just rot in the ground. And the kids were like, oh my God, no. So science goes, look, you're dead, you're dead. Your personality goes, all your emotions go, all your experience goes. A lot of people don't like that idea. Do you want the fact that your personality just goes into oblivion and that all the people you know and love just disappear? It'd be really bad if all the people you hated showed up. So, but the idea here is that life and death are intimately... You remember what John Edwards said? These are the same thing. He said life and then there's life. Remember? And he said he hated those terms like expired and past, or he said past, dead, or whatever. Yeah, expired, like milk, like their milk or something like that.
What do people with near-death experiences say?
Interesting enough, there is a thing where they have, some scientists have done studies, and there is, email me because I want to get you the research on this, because I think that's an interesting topic. Interestingly, the studies have shown, and I love the way scientists try to explain this away, that most people see similar things. They hear music, they see light, they feel a different way. Some people say, I've read, and these are Christian pamphlets, some people said that they were sent to hell where monsters ripped them apart and things like that. And then after they woke up, they all of a sudden turned to Christianity and stuff. The scientists tell you this, oh, that's because when you have a near-death experience, your brain and body release hormones and chemicals that make you hallucinate these experiences. That's how they try and explain it away.
Dying, so how could you...
This is what I would say to scientists. I don't think a scientist on their deathbed is going to say that. Do you? It's like what they say. There's no atheists in foxholes.
Yeah. Oh my God.
You know, there's no atheists on a plane that's going to. Nobody's going. Save me, nobody. It's a way different story when you face death in the face. Somehow these scientific beliefs and these skeptical attitudes go bye-bye. So yes, you wanted to ask.
One of my friends, he drank too much and his heart stopped 5 times.
Oof, it's like flatliners.
Yeah, and he said that he saw a bright light.
Did he hear music?
I don't know, he just said he saw a bright light.
Did he hear a voice that said you have to go back now? Some people say that. You know what's interesting, there was actually a movie in the I think it was the late 80s with Keith Sutherland, Kevin Bacon, who got robbed by Bernie Madoff. So it wasn't just a mess. Julia Roberts, Oliver Platt. It was an ensemble cast. It was called Flatliners, and they were medical students, and they wanted to know what happens to you after you died. So they killed themselves. Like they injected some serum in their body, stopped their heart, and they had those paddles. Because your body can stay dead for a little bit of 10, 15, 20 minutes. People have been dead. People have been technically, physically dead for an hour and been brought back, which is really weird because without blood to your tissues, they're going to rapidly deteriorate. Your brain is going to die real quick. But that suggests to religious people there is a spirit, and it jumps back into your body. Homer, in The Simpsons, when Homer dies, he always jumps back in his body when food is mentioned. So he died one time, and his boss goes, "Send his wife a consolence ham," and he goes, ham, and he jumped back in his body, and his boss goes, "Cancel the ham." And he said, "Oh." Anyway, he choked on a donut one day too. So anyway, but also most importantly, psychics are real and can be proven to be real. Okay. All right. Any questions or comments on any of this? All right. Let me talk about stigma. This will be one of the last thing we talk about today. Next time I'm going to show you an episode from Long Island Medium. So this one is a little bit different to John Edwards. Huh? Didn't somebody the other day, wasn't it you? You said you saw John Edwards?
No, oh yeah, I saw him at that part.
So if he lives around here somewhere, somebody trying to find out where he lives. I want to stalk him. And I'm not giving him $500. That guy charges up the wazoo. I wonder what his readings say about being money grubbing. Because even to get into his little readings, it's $250. And if you want a private reading, it's like $500 to $1,000. And if you pay, like go to Old Westbury and see, you're not guaranteed a reading.
What a good person, though, huh? What a great person. Let me just take $1,000.
Yeah. And here, you'll find out Edgar Casey virtually took no money.
That Long Island Medium woman is like, I heard somebody say to me that if you make an appointment now, you don't get one for a year from now.
Well, what do you expect? I mean, she's for real to a lot of people.
I met her.
Somebody want to add something? Go ahead.
I met that lady on the medium. I know her son.
Can you get her to come in?
I went soccer bombing.
Can you get her to come in?
You're soccer bombing.
Yeah. Oh, maybe.
Try what you can, even just for 20 minutes.
Ask her if she wants to.
Even in a phone interview, I'll take a phone interview.
He was like
If she's psychic, she should perceive me talking about her.
he was
She
like
should
telling
know.
us about all the spirits and stuff.
Now she's got her kids all whacked.
You know what? Here you go. Edgar Casey said that if he wanted to see somebody, all he had to do was sit in front of a mirror and think about them for 20 minutes, and they would show up. So maybe if I think long enough of this Long Island medium, she'll show up.
You're like on South Park when they bring Biggie Smalls back.
Something. Give it up for Biggie. Anyway. All right. So let's talk about social stigma. So there's a cut, and this leads to several things. So stigma is this idea of a mark or a label or a category, a negative category, or a title or whatever. I think the best way to think of stigma is like, remember what Hitler did to Jewish people in the camps? Put a tattoo on them and made them wear the Star of David. He was stigmatizing them. Like literally putting a mark on them, literally putting, or those of you who's read Hawthorne's book, The Scarlet Letter. What was the point of the Scarlet Letter?
So everyone knew what you did.
Right, it was a big red A, and it stood for adultery. Right. What I love about the book is the debate about it was the preacher that had sex with her, right, or whatever, and they put no mark on him. So anyway. So this is a mark that was given that is from a social perspective. And here's the thing. That many times this is an external mark placed on you by other people. So if you have people who think you're a jerk, if you're not around them, are you a jerk anymore? Necessarily? Nope. Not really, right? And this becomes an issue of like the self-fulfilling prophecy and stuff that people who label you as a jerk, you start to believe it or internalize it. There's another form, again, so the external force, somebody applies this to you, but it can also work internally. And with Edgar Casey, both these things were working. His fear of being stigmatized externally by others was driving his own, what we call self-stigma. And if you read on page 50, you can hear this. Page 50 to 51. They're talking about how he was a kid and he was playing a game, and he goes, actually on the other page, he said, his father was talking about how he slept on these books, and he goes, yes, I see pictures of the pages. Well, I won't bother you anymore about it, but I think it's something that should be studied. There are so many things we don't know about. He said, don't let it worry you, and don't stop doing it. There's no harm in it. Now run along and play with the rest of the boys. He ran out and joined the game of Old Sal, a variation of Prisoner's Base, which is like tag or something, that the boys were playing. He ran faster than usual and threw the ball harder, trying to forget the feeling that came over him when he thought about being different from others. What's that make you feel like when you think you're different or odd and it has negative consequences? What's that make you feel like? You got a big zit on your forehead, or you're wearing the wrong clothes, or you're the wrong type of person, or like you go to a black tie affair and you're dressed in jeans. What's that make you feel like? Right, and it's a very negative, damaging feeling. It makes you want to run away. There's feelings of shame and embarrassment. What we call social mortification, which is what sometimes your parents do to you, like when you were kids at the mall, right? If they ever spanked you in public. That's being socially mortified. It's like being depantsed. you know, in front of people is what it is. It seriously is. It's like, there you go. If you've ever seen the movie Weird Science. Hey, check us out. Anyway. Or you're like, here's a good one. You're at a restaurant and you go in to use the restroom, and the sink is like wet, and you lean up against it, and you got white pants on, and now the front of your pants are wet. What's it look like? Like you pissed your pants. And some people will sit in. They'll push if there's an air dryer in there, and they'll sit there like this with their pants next to the air dryer, and they won't go outside. If you've ever seen that movie Roxanne, that's Cyrano de Bergerac with Steve Martin. One of the characters does that, and he crawls out the bathroom window to prevent people from seeing him. He could have just said, "Look, it's water," because you know urine's got color to it, so and quite a nasty smell as well. So I think there's no mistaking that. Anyway, although strangely it is sterile, because there's some moron boxer who drinks his own urine. Not kidding. It's just like in Waterworld. Anyway. People were always staring at him now, and the boys would holler, listen, hey old man, how about sleeping on our lessons for us? See, here's the ribbing and the insults. It was because his father told everybody about it. Thanks, Dad. Right? And why did Dad tell everybody? Because he wanted to make his son into a socially mortified, stigmatized figure? What was behind his dad?
He was proud.
Yeah, he's like, man, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Just like, you know, some other psychic or you know, like these Long Island mediums or John Edwards. I bet John Edwards' mom loved this stuff. Right? Anyway. The squire was proud of his son and wanted him to show folks how smart he was and how quick he could learn anything by sleeping on it. He burned with shame every time he thought about it. Run, old man, run. And I find it funny that his family calls him old man. They called him that from the time he was 3 or 4. What is interesting about this that came about later on was that Edgar Cayce, after he started doing health readings, there was a couple health readings where he said stuff like this. The patient is sick because of things that the patient did in a past life. And people were like, what? And so Edgar Cayce started doing past life readings on people, what they had done. And again, this is an 8th grade education, devout Christian. Christians do not believe in reincarnation. If you doubt what I say, go to your church on Sunday and tell your priest or your minister that you believe in reincarnation, or that you were like Marie Antoinette or King David or something like that, and see what kind of a look you get. It'd be better to say you believed in psychics. What came out later is that Edgar Cayce had hundreds of lives on this planet. And here's the other thing. Edgar Cayce said the reason why people are family members with people and friends with people is that you've had things with people in their past lives. So maybe your dad was your brother in a past life, or your sister, or maybe you were married to one of your friends. Seriously, this is what he said. And remember I told you, you don't say stuff like this out in public or in a Christian church, that Jesus was Adam. You want to get excommunicated from the church? You go right ahead and you say that, right? That's like saying that priests should have sex or something like that. This is not going to go over well. So let me read the rest of this. He ran and made it, but the ball hit him at the end of the spine just as he reached the base. The bell rang, and then they ran into the classroom. All during the afternoon, he acted queerly. Next time we'll get to the impacts of stigma. Laughing and giggling, making faces, throwing spitballs, he was injured. He had a spine injury. Mr. Thumb was distressed, but did not keep him after school, thinking his questions had upset the boy. Going home, he rolled on the ground, jumped into ditches. This is way worse than being a psychic. And stood in the middle of the road, stopping buggies and teams with upraised hands. At home, his mother had put some green coffee beans in a pan and was roasting them on the kitchen stove. He took the pan in his hand, unmindful of his heat, and went into the yard. There he sowed the coffee as if it were seeds. During supper, he threw things at his sisters, laughed uproariously, and made faces at his father. The squire put him to bed. When he was under the covers, he became serious. He gave instructions for a poultice to be placed on the back of his head near the base of his brain. He was suffering from shock, he said, and would be all right in the morning if the poultice were applied. What should I do, the squire said to his wife. This was the first time he did a health reading on himself. And this was when he was like 12. Make it, his wife said. There isn't anything in it that can hurt him. Cornmeal, onions, and some herbs. You see why doctors probably don't want to listen to what Edgar Cayce said? Compare the price of cornmeal, onions, and some herbs to Lipitor or Viagra or these cancer medications. Some elderly people spend more money on their medication than they do on rent and food combined. And many times they have to decide what to get. Edgar Casey, almost all of his recommendations were for simple things: castor oil, peach poultices. All right, we'll stop it there and pick it up. Make sure to read. Everybody have a good holiday and weekend, and I'll see everybody on Monday. That Psychic Medium show, though, is on as well on Learning Channel if anybody's interested.